The chamber was alive with sound before she even entered. Thousands of alien voices overlapped, some high and piercing, others deep and vibrating like the core of a drum. The room itself was shaped like a great circle, carved into black stone that shimmered with blue light. Every wall was layered with symbols of different star empires, glowing softly like constellations. It was a place meant to impress, to remind anyone who stood at the center that they were small before the galaxy. She was that small figure now. The door slid shut behind her with a heavy sound. Every head turned, hundreds of eyes, some bright, some dark, some blinking sideways, locked on her. The weight of their stares pressed down like a storm. She walked forward anyway, her boots clicking against the polished floor that seemed too large for a single human to cross. Whispers broke out immediately, not the curious kind, but the sharp tone of mockery. "That is the human?" One voice rasped from a corner where a creature with glassy skin leaned forward. "So fragile, so short-lived." Another laughed, its teeth clicking together in amusement. "Why send one so young?" Came a deep growl from the back row. "Do they have no leaders left on their broken world?" Their words carried across the chamber with no effort, and the laughter spread like fire leaping from branch to branch. She could hear the hissing chuckles, the rumbling taunts, even the clicking tongues of species that didn't laugh like humans but still found joy in mocking her. They all spoke of Earth the same way. Unlivable, wasted, dead. To them, Earth was nothing more than a warning, an example of what happens when a people ruin their own soil and choke their own air. To them, humanity was stubborn in the worst way, clinging to a planet no one else would dare call home. But she did not flinch. She reached the center platform and stood still. Her figure looked small compared to the towering beings that filled the tiers around her, but her stillness was sharper than their noise. She didn't raise her hands to ask for silence. She didn't plead for respect. She simply looked around the room, her dark eyes moving slowly from one alien to another, as if she was measuring them rather than being measured. At first, they laughed louder, thinking her silence was weakness. "Has the child forgotten her words?" One hissed, the long frill on its head shaking in false pity. "Perhaps the air here is too clean for her lungs?" Another sneered, drawing more laughter. But slowly, the laughter began to thin. Something in her stillness unsettled them. Something in the calm way she faced them, with no trembling in her hands, no fear in her stance, made them hesitate. The chamber was built for noise, for speeches, for roaring voices. Yet the longer she stood in silence, the heavier it felt. The voices faded, one by one, until the chamber that once shook with mockery grew quiet. She let the silence stretch before finally speaking. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. It was steady, every word landing in the quiet like a stone dropped into still water. "You call Earth unlivable," she said. The words hung in the air. No one interrupted. "You call it a graveyard," she continued. "A wasted land, a broken world." Her gaze moved again across the sea of faces, unblinking. "And yet we live there, we breathe there, we survive there." A ripple went through the chamber. Some leaned forward to listen more closely. Others stiffened, their earlier smiles fading. "You measure life by comfort," she said softly, almost gently. "We measure it by endurance. You call our skies ruined, but still we rise under them. You call our oceans poisoned, but still we sail and fish and fight storms. You call our soil barren, but we plant again and again, even in ash." Her voice grew firmer with each word, though she did not shout. "You mock Earth because you think it is weak, but it is not weakness to stay. It is not weakness to rebuild. It is not weakness to call home a place that tests you every single day. That is strength. And that is why humanity remains." The chamber was silent again, but this time it was not the silence of her patience. It was the silence of their unease. The silence of aliens who had never endured storms of fire or skies filled with dust, who had never been forced to claw survival from a planet that seemed determined to break them. She stood there, her chest rising and falling slowly, her voice steady as she finished. "You call Earth unlivable. I call it home. The last word echoed in the chamber, sharp and unshaken. No one laughed now. No one dared to. For the first time in that grand hall, the voices of the galaxy had fallen completely quiet. Not because they chose to listen, but because they could not find the courage to speak against her. And in that silence, humanity had spoken louder than all of them. The silence that followed her first words did not last long. The chamber, built for endless debate, could not hold its tongue. One by one, the voices returned, but this time they were sharper, more deliberate. The aliens had heard her claim Earth as home, and they were not ready to let such defiance pass without striking back. From the upper tiers, a being with translucent skin leaned forward. Its body glowed faintly, showing veins like rivers of light. Its voice rang cold, cutting through the chamber. "You speak of survival," it said, "but survival is not life. Your people crawl among ruins, breathing poison and calling it courage. That is not strength, it is desperation." A wave of agreement rippled through the chamber. Several nodded, their strange forms swaying in rhythm, their voices layering one after another. Yes, Earth is broken. Yes, the humans are blind to their own suffering. They cling to ashes and call it pride. Laughter followed, though softer this time, not wild but mocking in its certainty. The sound rolled down the walls like thunder, pressing in from every side. She stood still, her eyes calm. She did not interrupt. She let them speak, let them sharpen their ridicule. She knew their words carried the weight of habit. They had mocked Earth for so long that the words came as easily as breathing. Then another voice rose, heavy and rumbling. A creature covered in jagged scales spoke, its massive jaw snapping with each word. "We left worlds behind that were richer than your Earth. When fire came, we moved to safer skies. When the ground turned to dust, we found new soil. That is wisdom. That is survival. And yet you cling to a dying planet as if chained to it. That is not honor. That is foolishness." The words struck like a spear, and once again, others joined in. They could have left. They could have joined other worlds. They stayed because they were too weak to change. Her silence deepened, but she did not look away. She let their scorn echo across the chamber, filling it, feeding it. She did not flinch when some aliens sneered openly at her, their eyes glowing with ridicule. She did not lower her gaze when one alien, thin and sharp like a blade of bone, pointed at her and laughed. "Earth is not a home. Earth is a coffin." The chamber erupted at that. The phrase spread quickly. "A coffin!" Voices repeated, amused and cruel. The laughter swelled again, growing stronger, filling the vast dome with a rhythm of mockery. It was a chorus of dismissal, a song of scorn for a world they believed long buried. But beneath the noise, something began to shift. Not everyone laughed. Some listened. Some frowned, not at her, but at the cruelty in the chamber. A few alien diplomats leaned back, their expressions uncertain. They had heard these same words for years, but now, spoken in her presence, against her calm, unshaken silence, they began to sound less like truth and more like arrogance. She noticed. Her eyes moved quietly, catching the ones who did not laugh, the ones who stayed still. She did not smile, but a spark lit in her gaze, a spark that said she was not defeated, not broken, not even shaken. When the laughter finally slowed, she raised her head slightly. She had not spoken a single word since her first claim, and yet the chamber leaned closer, waiting. Her voice was calm, softer than their jeers, but it carried as though the walls themselves wanted it heard. "You speak of wisdom," she said, "but what wisdom is there in abandoning what shaped you? What wisdom is there in fleeing at the first wound? Earth has been scarred, yes, burned, poisoned, broken, but it still breathes, and so do we." Her words fell into the chamber like stones into fire. The laughter faltered. "You call Earth a coffin," she continued, her tone sharpening, "but you do not see what is inside. Not death, not despair. Life, stronger than before. Roots that dig deeper after fire. Rivers that cut new paths after poison. People who endure storms instead of fleeing from them. You call that weakness. I call it strength. A hush began to spread again. Some aliens shifted uncomfortably, their earlier confidence dimming. She was not raising her voice, not trying to outshout them. She didn't need to. Each word was a quiet blade, slicing through their scorn. The being with glassy skin hissed, trying to regain control. You glorify pain. You worship suffering. Her gaze met its glowing eyes, steady and unbroken. No, she said simply. We honor survival. We honor home. And home is not abandoned. The chamber fell into uneasy silence once more. The mockery had not vanished, but it had cracked. Their laughter no longer sounded certain. Their jeers no longer rang as truth. The voices of mockery had become weaker, and the weight of her words pressed against the chamber walls, harder than before. For the first time, the question shifted, not whether Earth was unlivable, but whether the humans who refused to leave it were far stronger than anyone had ever imagined. The chamber was still uneasy after her last words. The echo of her calm defiance lingered in the air, heavier than the walls of stone and light. Some aliens fidgeted, their confidence shaken. Others folded their arms, trying to cover the discomfort creeping across their faces. They had expected her to collapse under mockery. Instead, she stood taller with each insult thrown at her. And now the chamber demanded more. A metallic voice rang out from the upper tiers, steady and cold, belonging to a diplomat whose body was made of steel-like plates. You claim strength in hardship, it said, the words sharp as blades. Then prove it. Tell us, why should the galaxy believe in a people who refuse to leave a ruined rock? Murmurs spread. The demand was not simple curiosity. It was a challenge. The chamber leaned forward as one, waiting to see if she could truly defend the world they had mocked for centuries. She took a breath. She did not look frightened. Instead, her eyes narrowed slightly, and her voice rose, not in anger, but with a quiet power that carried across the chamber. You ask why we stayed, she began. Because Earth is not just soil and air. Earth is memory. Earth is blood. It is where we became who we are. To abandon it would not only be to leave a place. It would be to leave ourselves. A ripple of surprise spread through the tiers. Her words carried a weight the chamber did not expect. She continued before they could interrupt. You speak of survival as if it only means moving away, finding safer skies, easier soil. But survival is not always running. Sometimes survival is standing when everything around you tells you to fall. She paused. Her gaze swept across the sea of alien eyes. That is what Earth taught us. That is what Earth gave us. There was no laughter now, only a restless shifting, as though her words stirred something uncomfortable in them. She could feel it, the unease, the crack in their certainty. She pressed on. When storms came, we built homes that bent but did not break. When rivers drowned our fields, we learned to plant again in the mud. When fire consumed our forests, green returned, because we planted and waited and believed it would come back. When war tore us apart, we rose again, carrying scars but also carrying hope. Her voice grew firmer, not louder but steadier, as if every word carried the weight of her people behind it. Earth did not give us comfort. Earth gave us challenge, and challenge forged us. The chamber shifted again. Some diplomats exchanged uneasy glances. A few lowered their eyes, no longer so eager to meet her gaze. They had lived on perfect worlds, where food grew without effort, where air was clean and endless. They had never struggled the way she described, never clawed survival from the ashes of ruin. Her hand lifted slightly, her small figure casting a long shadow under the glowing lights. You mock Earth as unlivable. But tell me, could your worlds endure what Earth has endured? Could your people survive skies of fire, oceans of poison, and lands of dust, and still rise to sing, to build, to dream? Her question hit the chamber like a sudden storm. Silence rushed in again, not calm this time, but sharp, as if no one dared answer. You call us weak because we stayed, she said, her voice now carrying a quiet edge. But strength is not measured by the ease of your days. It is measured by how you face the hardest nights. Earth has given us those nights again and again, and still we live. Her eyes swept across the tears once more, not in defiance but in challenge. So I ask you, who among you can say the same? Which of your perfect worlds could test you as Earth has tested us? Which of your people could endure what we have endured and still call it home? No one spoke. The chamber of voices, a place built for endless sound, could not find words. The silence stretched, longer and heavier than before. In that silence, her voice was the only thing that mattered. A single human voice, rising not in shouting, not in anger, but in steady truth that cut deeper than any roar. For the first time, the laughter was gone. For the first time, the chamber did not mock. They listened, truly listened, and in that listening, something shifted. She was no longer a fragile figure standing alone before them. She was a voice against the stars, and the stars had no answer. The chamber had grown quieter than it had ever been. Her challenge had silenced the voices of ridicule, but silence was not enough. She knew they needed more than words of strength. They needed to see what Earth truly meant. They needed to feel the weight of her home, not as an idea, but as living memory. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she spoke again, her tone changed. It was softer now, warmer, carrying a rhythm that pulled the listeners closer. When you laugh at Earth, she said, you do not laugh at dirt or sky. You laugh at the people who rise every morning under that sky. You laugh at the children who play even in broken streets, chasing each other with voices louder than the storm above. You laugh at the families who gather around fires when power is gone, who share bread even when there is little. You laugh at hope itself. A wave of stillness spread through the tears. Some aliens frowned, their earlier arrogance dimming. She went on, her voice carrying like a story whispered across a campfire. I remember the forests. They burned in great flames, black smoke rising so high it turned the day into night. We thought nothing would grow again. But then green returned. Small shoots pushing through the ash, weak at first, then stronger until the forest stood again. I remember touching those leaves, still damp with morning rain, and knowing Earth was not finished. Her eyes lifted, and for a moment, the chamber saw not a representative but a daughter of her world. I remember rivers that turned black with poison. Fish died, people grew sick, and many said the water would never live again. But the river changed. It carved a new path, a fresh stream, and the water ran clear once more. Children returned to its banks, laughing as they skipped stones. Earth did not give up, and neither did we. The chamber was utterly silent now. Even the ones who hated her words leaned forward, unwilling to miss a single detail. She continued, her voice steady, painting her memories like a living picture. I remember storms that tore apart homes. Roofs were ripped away, walls broken. But the very next day, neighbors carried wood and stone to rebuild. Families opened their doors to the ones who had none. I saw laughter among ruins, not because the storm was kind, but because people were kind. That is Earth. That is who we are. Her words struck deep. Many of the aliens had never known such struggle. On their worlds, survival was easy, guaranteed. They had not needed to fight their own planet, nor rebuild after loss. And in her voice, they heard something they had never understood. Pride in scars, strength in memory. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the crowd. Her hands were steady at her sides, but her presence filled the chamber. Do you know what it means to sing songs while the world around you burns? To share stories while you bury your dead? To laugh with your children while you rebuild walls that may fall again? That is what Earth taught us. That is why we stayed. Because home is not perfect. Home is not safe. Home is where you fight, where you heal, where you remember. One of the diplomats, a tall creature with wings folded at its back, shifted uncomfortably. It had once mocked her with cruel amusement, but now its glowing eyes flickered with something else, doubt. Another, whose long limbs had clicked together in laughter earlier, leaned back with a troubled expression. The girl's memories were not arguments. They were truths, lived and unshakable. She took a final breath, her voice quiet now, almost a whisper, yet more powerful than any shout. You call Earth unlivable. But when I close my eyes, I see children running under open skies. I hear rivers singing again. I smell the smoke of rebuilt homes turning into warmth. I see families holding each other when everything else is lost. That is Earth. That is home. And no mockery can take that away. The words lingered, heavy as stone, soft as morning rain. And for the second time, the chamber of voices, where endless debate had raged for centuries, fell into a silence so complete it felt alive. Her memories had filled the room, and in that silence, every alien knew the truth. Earth was not just a world. Earth was a people. And no insult, no laughter, no arrogance could erase that. The chamber was never meant for silence. It was built for voices, clashing, arguing, rising in endless waves. For centuries, no speaker had been allowed to stand without interruption. Every idea was met with debate, every claim with noise. Yet now, after her words, the chamber was frozen. No alien moved. No whisper rose. The silence was not emptiness. It was heavy, pressing down like a storm before it breaks. She stood in the center, her figure small against the towering walls of stone and light. The glow from the high ceilings spilled across her shoulders, outlining her like a flame in the dark. She did not raise her arms in triumph. She did not smile. She simply stood, steady and calm, letting the silence itself answer her. The diplomats shifted uneasily. A being with wings folded tight across its back lowered its gaze, no longer able to stare at her. Another, whose eyes glowed with constant mocking light, now flickered as if uncertain. A tall figure made of glassy skin leaned back, its veins of light dimming. They had come expecting to laugh. They had come expecting weakness. But the human girl had filled the chamber not with rage, not with shouting, but with truth so sharp that even silence could not escape it. One alien finally moved. A creature with 6 arms tapped its clawed fingers against the stone rail. The sound was small, almost nervous, echoing too loudly in the quiet. This silence, it muttered, its voice unsure, is dangerous. But no one answered. She slowly lifted her gaze. Her eyes, dark and unshaken, swept across the tears. She said nothing, yet the silence deepened. Every alien felt the weight of her presence. Not because she was powerful, not because she was feared, but because she had turned their laughter against them. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost like a whisper, but the chamber carried it to every ear. You mocked us because you thought we were alone, she said, because you thought our home was broken. But listen to your silence. You cannot answer me, not because I am strong, not because I am clever, but because you know I speak truth. The silence pressed harder. Some diplomats looked at each other, searching for words, but none came. Their own voices had betrayed them, their endless confidence now crumbling in the quiet. She stepped forward, just one pace, yet it felt like the entire chamber shifted around her. You call us weak, but you cannot laugh now. You call our world a grave, but you cannot bury my words. You call us broken, but you cannot break our silence. The tension grew unbearable. It was not silence anymore, it was shame. For the first time, the galaxy's proudest voices had no argument. Their laughter had been replaced by unease, their scorn by doubt. The chamber, designed for endless sound, had been defeated not by war, not by violence, but by the calm defiance of a single human voice. The silence stretched longer, heavier, until even the hum of the glowing walls seemed too loud. The aliens sat frozen, their faces caught between pride and something new. Respect, though none would admit it aloud. She let it last. She let them sit in their discomfort. She knew silence was not emptiness. Silence was power. And right now, silence belonged to her. Finally, she spoke again, soft but unshakable. You cannot erase Earth with laughter. You cannot dismiss us with words. You cannot silence us. Because even when we are mocked, even when we are underestimated, we endure. That is what Earth has always taught us. Her words floated into the silence like sparks into dry air. None of them dared to answer. For a long moment, the chamber of voices remained still, a place that had never known such quiet. The silence itself was proof of her victory. She had not come to fight with weapons or shout with anger. She had come to stand, to speak, to remind them of something they could not deny. And as she stood in that vast, echoing silence, the galaxy realized something it had never believed before. Earth might be scarred, Earth might be harsh, but Earth had given its people something stronger than all their perfect worlds could offer. Unshakable resilience. The silence did not weaken her, crowned her. The silence still clung to the chamber like a shadow that refused to lift. Every alien sat frozen, their voices stolen, their arrogance shaken. The human girl had turned their endless laughter into unease, their noise into quiet. But silence was only the beginning. Now she needed to press further, beyond memory, beyond defense. She raised her head and let her gaze sweep across the tiers of glowing eyes. Her words came slow, each one deliberate, as if she were placing stones that would not be moved. "You sit on perfect worlds," she began softly. "Your skies are clean. Your oceans stretch wide and clear. Your soil gives without struggle. And you think this is strength. You think this is life." No one dared to interrupt. The chamber leaned forward as one, pulled by the sharp edge of her calm voice. "But what happens when your perfect worlds are touched by fire?" she asked. "What happens when your skies turn black? When your oceans boil? When your soil gives nothing but dust? Will your people still sing? Will they still stand? Or will they flee?" The question cut through the silence like a blade. Some diplomats shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others frowned, their jaws tightening. They were not used to being questioned, especially not by a human, especially not by a girl who stood alone against the chamber. She did not falter. "You laugh at Earth because it burned," she said, her voice stronger now, steady as stone. "But Earth endured. You laugh because its rivers were poisoned, but Earth carved new ones. You laugh because storms tore our homes apart, but we built them again, stronger each time. Can you say the same for your worlds? Can your people endure scars as we have?" The silence deepened, this time heavier, more suffocating. No one spoke, not because they could not, but because they feared the answer. Her hand lifted slightly, not as a plea but as a challenge. "Strength is not measured by how gentle your world is. Strength is measured by how you rise when your world tries to break you. That is why we stayed. That is why Earth is still ours." The chamber stirred at her words. A few aliens glanced at each other, their eyes filled with doubt. The pride that had carried their earlier laughter now looked fragile, like glass ready to crack. She took another step forward, her voice ringing clearer than before. "So I ask you this, if your perfect skies turned to ash, if your seas drowned your homes, if your lands refused to feed you, would you endure? Would you fight? Or would you run to another world and call that survival?" Her words echoed through the chamber, sharp and undeniable. A heavy pause followed, and in that pause, the truth hung in the air like a storm cloud. Many of them knew the answer. Their people had never been tested as Earth had tested humanity. Their survival had been easy, given, never fought for. One alien finally stirred, its voice uncertain. We would adapt." Her eyes turned toward it, calm and piercing. "Adapt by leaving," she said softly. "Adapt by abandoning. That is not the same. To adapt is to stay, to endure, to change with the storm and still rise in the same place. That is what we did. That is why we still stand on Earth." Her words struck like thunder. The chamber felt smaller now, the towering walls closing in on the proud voices who had mocked her. Their silence was not just shock, it was shame. She let the weight of her challenge linger before speaking again, her tone quiet but unshakable. "So tell me, stars of the galaxy, who is truly strong? Those who run when the first wound appears, or those who bleed, endure, and rise again on the same ground? Which of you can say you have done what humanity has done?" No answer came. The chamber of voices, once built for endless debate, was now a cage of silence. Her challenge had stripped them bare, exposing the truth they had hidden behind laughter and pride. She stood taller now, her figure small but unbroken. You can mock Earth. You can call it unlivable. But until your worlds survive what ours has survived, you cannot call yourself stronger. Until your people rise from ashes as we have, you cannot call us weak. Her final words hung in the air like a flame that refused to die. The chamber remained silent. Not the silence of arrogance. Not the silence of amusement. This was a silence of defeat. And in that silence, the challenge was clear. The stars had been measured against Earth, and for the first time they had fallen short. The silence in the chamber had changed. It was no longer the silence of arrogance, nor the silence of shock. It was heavier, like a cloak pressing on every shoulder, reminding each alien that their laughter had been stripped away. What replaced it was harder to name. Was it respect, or was it shame? None could tell. But every being in that grand hall knew one thing. The human girl had won. She stood at the center of the circle, calm and steady. She was not smiling, not triumphant. Her face held no prideful grin. Instead, she looked tired, like someone who had carried the weight of an entire world on her shoulders and finally set it down before them. Her quiet presence spoke louder than any roar. The diplomats shifted uneasily. A creature with jagged scales lowered its head, no longer eager to mock. The winged figure, once quick to laugh, now kept its gaze fixed on the floor. The one with glassy skin, its veins dim and flickering, folded its arms as though trying to protect itself from the truth she had thrown at them. Her words had not only silenced the chamber, they had forced them to look inward. For the first time, the most powerful voices in the galaxy were confronted with a question they could not answer. Could we have survived what the humans survived? She stepped back slightly, her boots echoing on the polished stone. The sound seemed louder now than any of their jeers had been. She spoke again, her voice steady, each word chosen with care. You wanted to shame us. You wanted to laugh at us. But you forgot something. She paused, letting the silence stretch until the chamber leaned in, waiting. You forgot that scars are not shame. Scars are pride. They are proof that we endured, proof that we survived what should have destroyed us. The words struck deep. Many of the aliens glanced at each other, but none dared reply. They had mocked Earth for being scarred, but now those scars looked like badges of strength, things their own perfect worlds could never claim. She continued, her voice soft but piercing. Earth is not perfect. It may never be, but it is ours. Every storm, every fire, every broken stone is a part of us. And no matter how much you laugh, no matter how much you mock, you cannot take that pride away. The weight in the chamber grew heavier still. It was not just silence now, it was listening. True listening. She let her gaze travel across the tiers, locking eyes with those who had ridiculed her most. Not in anger, not in triumph, but in calm certainty. You can look down on Earth. You can call it weak. But today you have heard the truth. Earth does not need your approval to live. It does not need your respect to survive. We have endured without you before, and we will endure again. Her words were not shouted, but they rang louder than any roar. They carried the quiet, unbreakable pride of a people who refused to be erased. The chamber remained still. No one moved. No one dared speak. The voices of 100 worlds, each one used to filling the air with sound, had been silenced completely by one human voice. And in that silence, something shifted. The glass-skinned diplomat finally lifted its glowing eyes. For the first time, they did not shine with mockery. They shone with something else, something harder to admit. Respect. The winged alien beside it bowed its head, a gesture rarely seen in the chamber. Others followed, not with words, but with quiet nods, small movements that spoke louder than their earlier jeers. The girl saw it. She did not bow back. She did not thank them. She simply stood, her shoulders straight, her gaze firm. She had not come for their approval. She had come to speak the truth, and she had done it. When she turned to leave, her steps echoed again, steady and unshaken. The chamber watched her go, every eye following the small human who had faced them all and left them silent. At the great doors, she paused only once, her hand brushing against the cold surface. Without looking back, she spoke one last time, her voice carrying through the hall. Remember this silence. It is the sound of Earth standing tall. The doors closed behind her with a deep, final sound. The chamber of voices, for the first time in its long history, remained silent long after a speaker had gone. And in that silence, the galaxy carried a new truth. Humanity was not weak, not broken, not to be mocked. Humanity was scarred, yes, but those scars carried the weight of pride. And pride, once spoken aloud, could not be silenced again.